The Vanishing City, Uncovering the Dark Secrets and Fighting for Justice. Chapter 1, The Distressed Call. Detective John sat at his desk, staring at the computer screen in front of him. He had been working on a case for the past week, but it seemed to be going nowhere. He rubbed his tired eyes and took a sip of coffee, hoping it would help him stay awake. Just as he was about to give up for the night, the phone rang. He picked it up, expecting it to be another routine call. But the voice on the other end was filled with distress. "Detective John, please help me. My sister has gone missing, and I don't know what to do. She was last seen in the Vanishing City, and I'm afraid something terrible has happened to her." The Vanishing City. Detective John had heard of it before. It was a small, isolated town with a strange reputation. People who went there never came back. Rumors of strange occurrences and mysterious disappearances surrounded the place. He tried to calm the person on the phone, assuring them that he would do everything in his power to find their sister. But as he hung up, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The Vanishing City was not a place to be taken lightly, and he had no idea what he was getting himself into. Despite the warnings and lack of information about the city, Detective John decided to take on the case. He knew he couldn't ignore a distress call, especially when someone's life was at stake. He gathered his belongings and headed out the door, making his way to the Vanishing City. As he drove, he couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. What kind of horrors awaited him in the city? Would he be able to solve the case and save the missing person? The Vanishing City loomed in the distance, its dark silhouette against the setting sun. Detective John took a deep breath and stepped into the unknown. Chapter 2, Into the Unknown. Detective John had arrived in the Vanishing City, known for its eerie reputation and strange disappearances. As he stepped out of the train station, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The city seemed to be frozen in time, with old-fashioned buildings and cobblestone streets. The atmosphere was heavy, and the air felt thick with mystery. John took a deep breath and reminded himself that he was here for a reason. He needed to find the missing person and solve the case, no matter what. He made his way to the hotel where he would be staying and checked in. The first order of business was to visit the last known location of the missing person, a local bar called the Black Raven. John had a gut feeling that he would find some clues there. As he walked towards the bar, he couldn't help but notice the strange looks he was getting from the locals. They seemed to know something he didn't. When he arrived at the Black Raven, John was surprised to find that it was closed. He knocked on the door, but no one answered. Just as he was about to leave, he heard a noise coming from inside. He tried the door again and found it unlocked. As he stepped inside, John was hit with a wave of nausea. The air was thick with the stench of alcohol and decay. The room was empty except for a few overturned tables and broken chairs. He walked towards the bar and noticed a piece of paper tucked under the counter. It was a receipt for a shipment of chemicals, with a note that read, "For the puppeteers." John's mind was racing. Who were the puppeteers? What kind of chemicals were they using? And most importantly, what did they have to do with the missing person? As he was about to leave, John heard footsteps approaching. He quickly hid behind a nearby table and watched as two men entered the bar. They were dressed in dark suits and had a menacing air about them. They were talking about a shipment of chemicals and how it was vital to the organization's plan. John's gut told him that they were the puppeteers. John knew he had to be careful. He didn't want to blow his cover or get caught by the puppeteers. He quietly slipped out of the bar and made his way back to the hotel. As he sat in his room, John couldn't shake the feeling that he was in over his head. The puppeteers were clearly dangerous, and he was just one man. But he couldn't give up. He needed to find out more about them and their plan. He decided to go back to the Black Raven and see if he could gather more information. Little did John know, he was about to uncover a web of deceit and danger that would put his life in peril. Chapter 3, The Puppeteers. Detective John was stunned by what he had just discovered. The missing people from the Vanishing City were not random victims but part of a larger plan orchestrated by an unknown group of people. He had stumbled upon a secret organization that was using advanced technology to control minds and erase memories. As he dug deeper into the organization's operation, he learned that the goal was to create a new world order where they would be the ones in power. They believed that they knew what was best for the world and were willing to do whatever it took to achieve the goals. Detective John knew that he had to stop them. He had a duty to protect the innocent and bring the perpetrators to justice. he began to formulate a plan to expose the organization and put an end to their sinister plot. The detective's first move was to gather evidence to prove the organization's existence and their crimes. He scoured the city, looking for any clues that would lead him to their headquarters. He questioned locals and searched abandoned buildings, but he could not find any concrete evidence. Days turned into weeks, and Detective John's frustration grew. He knew that time was running out, and he needed to act fast. Then, one day, he received a call from an anonymous source, tipping him off about a secret meeting between the organization's leaders. Detective John sprang into action, preparing for the showdown that would determine the fate of the Vanishing City. He reached out to a few allies he had made in the city, who were also working against the organization. Together, they formulated a plan to infiltrate the meeting and gather evidence. The meeting was held in an abandoned building on the outskirts of the city. Detective John and his allies arrived early, taking up positions and preparing for the operation. As the organization's leaders arrived, Detective John's heart raced with anticipation. The operation was a success. Detective John and his allies were able to record the entire meeting, gathering evidence of the organization's crimes and their plans for world domination. With the evidence in hand, Detective John knew that he could finally expose the organization and put an end to their reign of terror. But the organization was not going to go down without a fight. Detective John had become the primary target, and they would stop at nothing to silence him. He knew that he had to be careful and stay one step ahead of his pursuers. The detective had exposed the organization's crimes, but he still had a long way to go before he could put an end to their operation. The organization had many resources at their disposal, and they would not go down without a fight. Detective John had to stay vigilant and be ready for whatever came his way. Chapter 4. Hunted. Detective John felt a sense of unease as he stepped out of the abandoned building. The encounter with the mysterious figure had left him shaken, but he knew he couldn't let fear get the best of him. He had a job to do, and he wasn't going to let anyone stop him. As he made his way through the city's narrow alleys, he felt as though he was being watched. He quickened his pace, trying to shake off the feeling, but it only intensified. Suddenly, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned around, but no one was there. He was being hunted. He knew he had to be careful. He couldn't let the organization catch him, or all his efforts would be in vain. He had to gather evidence and expose their operation to the world. The next few days were filled with close calls and dangerous encounters. He was constantly on the move, always one step ahead of his pursuers. He couldn't afford to let his guard down, not even for a moment. As he sat in a small cafe, sipping his coffee and looking over his notes.
Thank you for joining us at Short Story Central, your go-to destination for captivating short fiction. If you're craving more tales that transport you to new worlds, make sure to subscribe to our channel for regular updates on the best short stories from around the globe. Don't miss out on your next literary adventure. Hit that subscribe button now and stay tuned for more exciting stories coming your way only at Short Story Central.